All right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you could just remember to silence your cell phones. This is the session on classroom inspection. I'd like you to help me welcome Brian Richard from Carnegie Mellon.
Hi there. Thanks for coming in. And just fair warning, this is a show and tell presentation. I'm not here to lecture you on the best way to do custom application development or anything like that. And because it's show and tell, I'm going to make sure that we have room at the end for questions if you have. And because of that and because of the seats, if anybody wants to come up to the front of the room to ask questions, we can have kind of an intimate discussion. But I'm going to go through the slide deck and we'll give you an overview of where I'm coming from and what I did. Here's your ladder agenda. I'm going to set some context for our organization and the problem that we solved. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the design approach, and in doing so, I'm going to walk you through the application itself. So I'm going to lift up the hood and poke away at some of the squishy bits. If you're not development-minded, if you are squeamish about code, don't worry, I won't linger there for long. But if, considering the number of people here, if you really are into the code, you can help me do a code review and make my work better. And I'm going to make sure that we talk about some lessons learned, because one of the real values of this particular project for me is the things that it taught me and the rest of my team about custom application development we can do in the future. A little bit about me. I'm a developer admin at Carnegie Mellon. I've been there for over 10 years. Prior to being a developer on this team, my background is primarily in systems administration, although I have done multimedia authoring and script stuff. Hopped all over the place. One of the things that I did not highlight on here that is actually kind of relevant is the custom application I'm talking about is for a classroom support team on our campus, and I actually used to work with them. Prior to the position that I'm in now, I actually helped with the infrastructure services that support them. So it meant a lot to me to help these folks because they were friends of mine. And I was able to appreciate the gnashing of hair that they went through in order to do the work. And that was why it was so rewarding to see what we've been able to accomplish. And another thing about this slide that is valuable to point out is on the last line I mentioned that a lot of the work we do is supporting internal partners through custom development. And this one project has been a valuable lesson for me on things that I know I'm going to be spending the next several years doing for other similar partners. A little bit about Carnegie Mellon, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, former home of the Las Vegas goalie Fleury, who we miss terribly. Carnegie Mellon University has about a little over 6,000 undergraduate students, a little over 7,000 graduate students. It is a reasonably small university, comparatively speaking, for the number of IT service centers we have around. We've benefited from having some really strong departments on our campus who have been happy to open up their own IT shops and run their own IT widgets and gizmos and email servers and other things like that. And it's that siloing of IT service centers around the university that ServiceNow is kind of helping us address in long-term projects for consolidating, centralizing services, or taking advantage of the IT service management tools in ServiceNow to help these other departments get greater value out of their IT. Okay, and in case you're more into a horizontal agenda than a vertical agenda, I'm just going to go over the problem we solved. I'm going to show you what we built, and then I'm going to talk about the lessons. Okay, some context about the specifics of what my team does and where we ended up with for this classroom inspection project. ServiceNow at CMU For a number of years now, we've been running primarily incident, problem, and knowledge. We are bringing on more modules. We have some active projects right now in the asset space. We're looking at PPM, and something that I didn't really highlight here is we have rolled out Service Portal, and it's been a big win, nice, shiny thing to ServiceNow faces that people have given us positive feedback for. And we're looking for more opportunities to take advantage of what Service Portal has to offer. But all things considered, we don't have an incredibly elaborate ServiceNow deployment. Now, going from that position, we have begun some work with partner organizations with the university, like I mentioned earlier. And since we're changing that, we really need to be nimble about bringing these partner organizations into the fold, helping them with their IT service management needs, solving their problems rapidly and in a fashion that meets their timing, their schedule. So we're talking short development cycles and iterative development. Solve a problem now and build on it over time. And that's kind of what this classroom inspection did for us. And the third bullet under partner organizations was important to me as a developer, and that we were able to identify with this particular project some opportunities to take advantage of existing modules so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel for every little bit and piece of the business process that we were addressing. Now, this third section about central IT consolidating as well, we go through a lot of organizational change. It's a source of some headaches and a lot of celebration too when we adapt our own central IT organization to meet the evolving needs of the university and our own evolving needs as a group. And some of that adaptation has to do with the unique niche needs of some of our teams. The cloud virtualization team has some really specific things that they're trying to do, and so there is an opportunity there for custom development to get them into request, for example. Now, video production events and classroom support are groups that you may not normally think of as central computing. We have them. They're actually good reasons why they're part of central. But it's a little bit different than typical IT to IT, yet it's very much the same. And it's, I think, a good reason why this classroom inspections app was a good example to share with you. Okay, getting right down to it. Here's the deal with the classroom support team in computing services. In all of the classrooms where technology is installed, the technology is network-based equipment using kind of a templatized version of media based upon Crestron technology with a touch panel and equipment like document cameras, video conferencing equipment, projectors, of course, course capture equipment, some pretty sophisticated stuff that requires some hand-holding in order to make it work. But essentially what happens is when an instructor or a student or a staff member comes into a classroom or a lecture hall or a conference, we want to make sure that from the scheduling panel, they can do 3 finger stabs and connect a video conference to our campus in Doha, or 3 finger stabs and record the current course session for their Spanish students to review that evening online, or use a document camera, or project their PowerPoint, or whatever it is. But the point is that we have a lot of stuff going on that needs to be maintained. It needs to be available 6 days a week, essentially from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I have some second thoughts about what those hours are, how accurate they are. But it's long hours for classrooms that are scheduled very heavily, and 16 full-time staff with 13 students. Now, the 16 full-time staff includes video engineers, software developers, a couple of managers, but a number of media technology technicians who are chasing down the technology in 177 classrooms that can't have downtime. For that group, the equipment has the same service requirements that the IT divisions expect of email, file service, like that. So Yeah, they have a lot to handle with a small team to do it. The problem they had, however, was that they were using a manual process for quality assurance. Essentially, one of their managers was establishing a written list, like he did it in Microsoft Word or text editor or something or other, of all of the rooms that he wanted somebody to look at today. And he was parsing it out to students on a day-to-day basis. I believe he was using the incident modules, at least to track his own work. But farming out this work manually to his student staff of 13 every single day. And so there, as you can imagine, there's a lot of opportunity for miscues, for errors not getting reported correctly, for rooms not getting looked at for days at a time just because somebody forgot that that was it. It was a painful manual process. And the guy who was in charge, great guy, really smart, incredibly capable, poor guy was overrun. And so this was a great opportunity for our team to step in and say, hey, listen, you already are familiar with ServiceNow because you're using incident to handle problems that you're reporting. And the way they were using it is essentially the students would find an error or maybe a faculty member would report it, and they would submit an incident, and the other 16 members of the team, the full-time staffers, would pick it up as part of the incident handling process. That's great. They're on board. They're familiar with the tool. But let's address that manual process, and that's what we did. Just to illustrate a little bit of what we're looking at, here's some classroom images. I don't need to zoom into it too awful much, but in those 177 rooms, there were network racks of equipment. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. And that was the problem that they needed to address. They needed to proactively identify issues. And so we turned to ServiceNow to help with that QA process via a custom application. But first, let me take a pause to appreciate business analysis. The guy who did all of this beautiful whiteboard work at AK. Before the development for this custom application began, and don't bother trying to squint and read any of this, that was not my intention for putting it up there. AK took the time to very carefully analyze what the problem really was that these guys were trying to solve. Not just addressing what was it you were writing down and passing out to students to do, but what was the business problem. And if I can make any recommendation for custom application development, if you're going to go off the reservation, depart from a module, develop something for a business need that doesn't match what's out of the box of ServiceNow, put the time in to whiteboard the crap out. Because when it came time for me to go into Studio in ServiceNow and build this stuff, the work that AK did on this business analysis up front saved me weeks of effort and an enormous amount of iteration with the end user. I didn't need to go directly to the classroom inspections team to find out what they were trying to accomplish. I could turn to first the whiteboard, which stayed like this for and then the documents that we were able to produce as a requirements spec. And one of the things that's valuable too, before I move on, is that the specifications that we drew from this and codified in a Word document, which remain labeled draft throughout the course of the development process, were not spec requirements that the end users were expecting us to deliver at the end of the process. We use an iterative application development process where we did our best to meet those specifications, but during the course of development, the course of working with the people who were actually using this tool, we had to adapt things over time. We made some assumptions about the right way to do it in ServiceNow for things like location. We're dealing with classrooms inside buildings, which there are a couple of different ways to represent that. Picked one, and we learned some lessons from it a little bit later. All right, the actual thing we built, this is a generalized flow chart. The ovals represent tables, and diamonds represent actual actions. So we started with putting rooms in the CMDB, and we extended a CMDB table for rooms so that we could add fields specific to the classroom inspections team. They had some really important stuff they needed to record in each room. As you can imagine, there's a lot of knowledge manuals, the directions on how to fix things that need to go with the facilities had to be attached to them. So we extended a table, gave it to them. And in that table for those rooms, we have some information about the conditions under which a room should be inspected. So every day, I run a job to scan through those room records and make a decision about whether or not an inspection should be done. There is an opportunity here to use change management. We don't already use change management in our instance. It's not a part of our organization quite yet. Rather than figuring that all out and solving an enormous problem in order to solve a modest one for the classroom inspections team, I just wrote a daily script for this and flagged that as an opportunity for development later on. So before anybody jumps up and says, hey, you could do this change management, we chose not to here in the interest of a shorter development cycle. So I scan through every day all of those list of records. I generate an inspection record, which shows up in the table, which I referenced in the upper right. An inspection record is not a checklist of the actions that the staff is doing. It's just a record of an event that needs to take place, the inspection. So date that it's created, who it's assigned to, an assignment, the status for whether it's completed or not. And when the staff member comes in to do the inspection, they may find a problem. A light bulb needs to be changed, or somebody disconnected all of the cables to hook up their Xbox, something like that. And that's, as you can imagine, an incident. And so we added a UI action to the inspection record in order to launch a record producer for incident, so that the problem solving and resolution process can continue in the existing incident process that the classroom has been using. And so that pinkish oval in the bottom right, that's actually a handoff to an existing process. We're just doing that now with a little bit more structured data based upon a record created specific to this process. So, all things considered, there are not that many moving parts here. And that's to our advantage, because despite the volume of work that this team needed to get done, well, they actually only needed to do so many different things. Just to give you a quick overview, and I'm going to jump into the application on our instance in a second. The image on the right is the application menu, the modules that we created for this team. And as I noted in the upper right, these are all filtered links specific to the business processes of those users. We had to adapt this a little bit based upon their needs, finding out how they're going to use it, and what kind of information they're going to try to zero in on. But as I have highlighted in red, we have 3 custom tables for this. 2 of them are actually this was developed as a scoped application. 2 of them, the inspections in the rooms, are actually within the scoped application. And just as a side note, the buildings one is a custom table that we already had created, where we already had institutional from our facilities folks about buildings on campus. And so we're taking advantage of that because it was available, and I didn't need to include it in. But anyway, there are 3 custom tables, as well as incidents and knowledge articles. The knowledge articles we included, by the way, for the room records, because at the time we did the analysis, and we're talking with this team, it was important to them to be able to include, like I said, manual information, some documents, maybe images relevant to a specific room. And we afforded or accommodated 2 different ways of doing that. You can either use attachments to just attach it to the room record, or if that team is going to choose to take advantage of knowledge and put these in knowledge articles, well, now it's available as a related list. So that was a decision where we didn't lock them down at go live, and we'll see over time which they take advantage of best. And if more development is needed, we'll do more development for them. But we didn't want to just choose one path. Okay, as a matter of clarification on the links, TEF, in case you're curious, is Technology Enhanced Facilities. That's the actual name of the team. That's the assignment group, Technology Enhanced Facilities. And then the registrar rooms and SLA rooms. This was one bit of iteration where things got complicated on us. Because we got started thinking, okay, you have one big pile of rooms, 177 that you're going to be inspecting. And in working with the team, it turns out that they're actually divided into two sets. Registrar rooms or registrar-controlled rooms that this team services as a part of their business. That's their mission, to inspect those classrooms. And then the SLA rooms are classrooms that are owned by other departments within the university that are not registrard. They're controlled by the departments themselves. And this technology-enhanced facilities team is not under any obligation to service the equipment in those rooms, but the manager of that group took it on himself to establish OLAs and SLAs with departments to say, hey, we have the staff, we have the know-how, give us a little cost recovery, we will inspect those rooms, maintain them for you. And he worked very hard at establishing that relationship well before this custom. And we were able to accommodate this custom development to help him with record keeping with those SLAs. And it was kind of a discovered business value we were able to give that manager. And I'll show you where that comes. Okay, don't go blind looking at this. I just wanted to point out two of the custom tables, inspections on the right, rooms on the left. I'm going to go into the application in a second. But inspections, just as context setting, is all custom. It's not, well, I guess it is extended from task. And rooms is extended from a CMU room table. But these are unique to this application, developed for this team. Okay, so let me switch over to, this is our dev instance. Let's see how blurry. Okay, so I'm going to show you just a little bit of the records themselves. I'm going to pop open Studio, look underneath, and walk you through the process. Okay, so we're actually going to start with rooms. Here is a room record. And again, this is a room record maintained by this assignment group, by this Technology Enhanced Facilities group. And it takes advantage of building, which is a shared table, so we can at least reference some common institutional information. But everything else here is relevant to their need. For example, inspection days. This is how we choose what day of the week an inspection is generated. For most rooms, they just pick one day, but we accommodate it. We inspect these rooms, a room every day. You can do that. There's a frequency where the team can determine, based upon the room type, whether it really is every week or bi-weekly or monthly. We include some contact information, which is useful for notification. Because when an inspection is completed, we're going to spin off a notification to this departmental contact just to say, hey, by the way, Technology Enhanced Facilities inspected the room, thumbs up, you're good to go. Or if there's follow-up, there is a paper trail that we pursue, continue communications with. The room record has a related list that gives me a reference to all of the inspections that have been completed on this. And here's room for attachments and knowledge specific. There's also a related list for incidents that have been, since rooms are CI in the CMDB, that relationship with incident is baked into the tool, and we're able to take advantage of that out of the box. And I'm not going to click on it right now, but I wanted to point out the Report a Problem button up above. This is a UI action that we created in order to a record producer. Now, like I said, every day a job is scanning through the table of rooms, examining the inspection day, the frequency. And it also, by the way, is taking a look at room type. And then it is going to, if a room matches, generate an inspection record. And the room type is valuable because that script that generates the inspection record does some auto-assignment. If it is an SLA room, there is one team that does the inspections. And so the inspection record is just assigned to them out of the box. Otherwise, it is available for the student staff. Let's take a look at an inspection record itself. This is the thing that's created. And this is only created, actually, if an inspection record is not already open. The presumption here, or the assumption, is that since the staff is cycling through this on a daily basis, they're closing inspection. And they only need one open one. They're not going to send 3 people at a time on Monday to look at a single room. And like I said, there's not a great deal of information about how the inspection is going to be conducted here. There's just an assigned to, an assignment group. There is a watch list just in case the team requires, and there's a simple status. I mentioned the UI. This is on the inspection record as well as the room record. So if I open that up, here's the form that was developed with the Technology Enhanced Facilities team to help them add additional information. And this is something that we worked with them to say, okay, we'll iterate this. Over time, you may find that there are only so many different problems to report. So we're not going to over-customize your record producer. This is all getting dumped into incident anyway as a description. So we're not going to overwork this, but over time, this is an opportunity to say, if your inspectors are finding that they need to capture different kinds of information, we'll add it here, and we'll bake that into the incident so that the reporting gets to the people who are fixing things in a more organized fashion. One of the advantages to having this as watered down as it is that the teams going out are going to be using mobile devices. The room records actually, I think it's the room. We have the field with the attribute for barcode scanner enabled so that the staff are able to put barcodes on lectern in the classrooms. So the staff can come in with a phone, scan the barcode in the room, and bring up the inspection record, or at the very least the room record, depending on what list they're looking at, for where they are now. And if they're looking at the room record, that gives them quick access from their phone or tablet to any documents or knowledge articles associated with that room without having to search. Or if they're conducting an inspection, it pulls up the inspection record, and they're able to type it in. Easy peasy, move on. And then the record producer, because it's so watered down, it actually is a very nice little interface on a cell phone for the staff to fill out, say, hey, this lamp's broken, submit, move on to the next inspection. Okay, I think that's all I want to dig into with the actual process here. One of the outcomes of this, by the way, is a daily report to the manager. And pull that up easy. I have to actually do this on purpose. I apologize to my boss in the back. There's a daily report that goes to the manager, which I know it's hard to read. But this is a breakdown of inspectors in the left-hand column, and these are room abbreviations at the top. So the manager is going to be able to drill in. This one happens to be a 3-month report because of the timing rate. Our semester's wrapping up, and it just happened to be that there were the inspections today. People are getting ready for. So I spun up a 3-month report. And if the manager's curious to know, Alex did 13 in Baker Porter, he can drill into all of those inspections and access information very quickly on what his team has been doing. And this is a scheduled report that he gets every morning. And I know he looks at them because he's a very detail-oriented guy. And that's another thing we've worked with him to say, hey, over time, if you find you have additional information you need to get out of this tool, we will build additional reports for you and work that out. And so far, he's been fine with the information that he's been getting. Okay. While I have a captive audience, we'll take a quick look at the moving parts underneath. Classroom inspection. So I did this work in Studio. I don't know how many of you are developers, but it makes it very easy to build this kind of tool. If you're not modifying an existing module where you really have to get into the nuts and bolts, but instead of building something from scratch, even if you're extending tables, application development from Studio, it's sweet. It's really nice. This tool it actually has just 2 tables. The classrooms, by the way, that's an import table that we use to populate rooms. So I was able to build these tables rather quickly. We have just a couple of business rules. One for making sure the time is updated as inspected. I closed that too quickly. I have another business rule for injecting an inspection record. A couple of script includes for gathering up the code that I need for passing information. One of the challenges that I had was actually the handing off from a room record or an inspection record to the record producer, the CI. Because I did this in scope, the scoped API didn't give me the methods that I expected in order to pass a session variable. And I'm not that great at session variable management. I'm not a sophisticated JavaScript developer. So I had to do a little bit of finagling, and I put this in as a script include to use Ajax to pass it on. Here are our UI actions. Here is my daily job for creating the inspections. So here's the code that went into examining the room records. And yes, I'm using a switch statement. For examining the room records in order to determine whether or not an inspection needed to be done today. And this is the one bit in here that I'm hoping for another bit of functionality in ServiceNow to come along and make obsolete. I would like to use a maintenance schedule of some kind under change, but we're not there yet, so I'm living with my business rule. As a matter of course, I needed to create a fixed script in order to, because it's in scope, to spin off inspection records dynamically in case we had an administrative need to override the scheduled job. And yeah, you'll notice that I don't have any roles. I'm using global roles generated as part of our LDAP user process. So the best practices would normally be to create a role within the scope specific to this application. And we didn't need to create a variety of roles for this group. In working with them, we determined that there's no need to separate managers from technicians and separate links and restrict access and all of that. This group is kind of nimble, and they're pretty well trained, and they work pretty well together. And it was better for them to just simply have one role for access to the entire application. And that kind of kept things simple. So we just adapted the process to what they needed. And then there are my application links. Okay. So let me move on. I'm zeroing in on my time here. Let's go back to here. I want to talk about the outcomes. And by the way, if any of you are really into this and want to look more closely at what I've done, I'll be glad to work with you after the session. Just I want to make sure that I'm leaving time at the end for questions that the entire group may have to ask or answer. But some of our big wins. We demonstrated our ability to spin something up quickly to address a specific business need. This is great for me, to be able to work with a team of friends who have a problem and get it done within a development cycle and put it in their hands without forcing them to wait until next semester or the end of the year or somewhere further down the roadmap. We were able to take advantage of some of the built-in modules like incident and knowledge to build something that really is custom for them, that doesn't necessarily look like it's globbed together from other things. And then we were also able to plan ahead enough with the requirements gathering process and with the development process to acknowledge that, hey, we can get this out now, but we can build on it. And it's not just a matter of iterative development, but it's also a matter of iterative requirements gathering. The tool is new to them, so they need to work with it for a couple of terms and learn how they might want to improve their inspection process. Now that it's not just a flurry of Post-it notes, there may be some other process improvements that they want to do. And we're waiting to see if we can get some more feedback from them about more bells and whistles that they would want to have. Here's a quote from a member of their team. A lot of text. I just highlighted a couple of things. Fundamentally, it's about they got some more reliability from the information that they're gathering about their inspection process. They have a complete, reliable system where they know if there's a room record and an inspection record is going to be generated for it. They're able to manage notifications with customers, and they have the opportunity over time to adapt those notifications to more sophisticated needs. And they're doing time tracking, which is kind of a challenge for this kind of thing, but it's valuable information for them to gather. How much time are their inspectors putting in on a room-by-room basis, not just on a shift-by-shift basis. And the idea of being able to nimbly go from this tool in a new process into their existing incident process, I think we're getting some feedback that that's really valuable to them too. The full-time staff, they know incident. They've been using it from day one, and being able to take the inspection process to just link it directly has been worthwhile for them. Something from my perspective, it was really important for me to see that this team liked going mobile, were enthusiastic about going mobile, and found the mobile interface effective for them. So that was nice to see. And then knowing that I'm able to provide daily reports with actionable information for the manager, that was a big win as well. Now some of the lessons. Scoped application development is kind of tricky. It's been something that I've been wrestling with since we started going down this road. Our team has a sort of a policy for new projects where we choose to go in scope first rather than developing new projects in global. And there are some little nuances to that have been a challenge with this project and other ones. I'll share those with you in a second. The iterative development process with this application demonstrated how simpler solutions now can give us the opportunity to have bigger solutions later. And the whole due diligence in deployment process of working with the team and making sure that their needs are being met, that they're a part of the process throughout the development cycle, the testing cycle, that they're looking at the application before they actually have to use the application. That due diligence is as important for a small custom app like this as it would be for a major module implementation. All right, a little more detail on some of the lessons learned with regards to scoped apps. We found managing forms and list views can be a little bit tricky. One of the things that I think we've learned from High and from some of our peers is there's a big difference between releasing things via update set when it's developed in a scoped app and releasing things by publishing it via the local repository, the store. You can lose some linkages to forms and list views. And that kind of munged some of the things. And it wasn't just with this project. We've seen that with some other projects. And so we're trying to be a little more clear about adhering to ServiceNow's best practices with releasing scoped apps. One of the goofiest things was the presence of ghost tabs on forms that appeared. And there was a bug in Helsinki that we saw where that was an issue. That got kind of tricky. We had to go to High to help us fix that. The management of the local repository, we're publishing our scoped apps in relation to our own development lifecycle, where we clone over our instances after every release. We just had to be very, very deliberate about that. We had some lessons to learn there as well about just making sure we know the state of our scoped apps, whether they've been released all the way to production or not, things like that. We have not yet taken advantage of Git fully. We do have all of our scoped apps connected to a GitLab repository. And we're learning how to take advantage of stashes so that we can, for example, within a scoped app, if we have 3 stories that we're trying to release and one of them doesn't pass UAT, we can't release that all the way to production. We can take advantage of stashing in Git to switch between branches and release only the bits that we want. We're not quite there yet with doing it with all of our production work, but it's been very powerful, and I've had the opportunity to talk to some people here at Knowledge about good ways to take advantage of that. Some more issues, the idea of exceptions for application scope have been challenging for me to learn, and I've gotten some really good feedback from the SN devs community in Slack on doing this right. It created some bumps in the road for me for this particular custom app, but in reaching out to my peer developers, either at ServiceNow or with other companies, I'm learning a lot, and they're important lessons that I'm going to be able to take forward to other custom applications. The scoped API has been a bit of a learning curve for me. I struggle with the documentation of the global versus the scoped API. There's an opportunity for me to learn a little bit, but it's something that it's worth acknowledging that could be an issue when I'm planning a custom application project, that there are things that I'm going to need to afford myself some time to, RTFM. A specific example of this was I mentioned how I struggled with passing parameters from from the inspection record to a record producer in order to generate an incident. That was a scoped API thing. And that was something that I could not find in the documentation for the scoped API, but I was able to get some help from community. Actually, within a day or two, I got some feedback from other developers. I just posted a wide open question. And the first response or two wasn't right on, but it got me in the right place. And then some additional follow-up that I got from some people gave me the solution almost word for word that I needed. And here's another thing, not specific to scripted development, but an opportunity for us to think about things for other custom applications. It has to do with location data. So generally speaking, there are 2 roads that I chose, or that I figured we could go down for locations. Because we have rooms within buildings for this. And we have other applications where we're going to be dealing with assets and CMDB items that have location-specific information. And there's the CMN_location table for location. And then there's also the CMDB, which has an opportunity to store locations there. And for this classroom inspections application, I chose to go into the CMDB, create separate tables for classes of location, rooms and buildings. And it had a lot to do with the custom fields that this team needed for those locations. For other applications, I don't need that kind of custom data relevant to those locations, so I'm using the location table itself. But this is an architectural concern that I have. I don't like the idea of having data in two different data storage formats within the tool. So our team is going to have to think this through and figure out if it is a good idea to keep things separated this way, or do we need to land on one and come up with another way of capturing that assignment group specific information. Okay, so that leaves us with the top takeaways. Big fan of custom application development for meeting niche needs like this. I'm also a big fan of leveraging existing modules as is. We did not modify knowledge at all to incorporate it in this, and there's absolutely no need to. We didn't need to adapt incident at all to accommodate this group's need. It was just an entirely separate process. But including those in the requirements analysis and acknowledging them as, for example, related lists on records was really valuable for me. And then the quirkiness of scoped app development. It would not be a barrier for me to continue going down this road with future custom applications. I think developing in scope has very important business value for us. And the more I work with ServiceNow, the more I learn about that. The key to that for me, and I hope that other people would express this as well, is staying connected with other developers. Not just via Hi, but community, SN Devs, Knowledge Conference, meetup groups, wherever you can contact other people to say, hey, I'm doing this thing and it's stupid. Can you help me figure it out? It's a big win. So there's that. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Brian, thank you so much for your presentation and great insight into a very cool application for a specific need. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions, and then I think Brian said that he'd be willing to hang out outside the room. So any questions in the room?
Anyone?
I had one. Did you measure any decrease in incident volume? Because it seems like you're able to be more regularly proactive now in your checks.
Well, that's an open question, and the application is new enough that we don't have good numbers for that. We're working with the team to think through those metrics. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to gather anything to bring with me. It's all anecdotal at this point, but these guys are cheering for the time saving.
Anybody else? Well, thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.